Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Frank Olsen Twins YouTube channel. One thing I've felt has been missing from my studio is a Tele style guitar. If you've seen my channel, you know I'm partial to the old Danelectro guitars, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to make a Tele build in the style of the old Danos. I recently made a DC59 clone with a plywood body, but this time I wanted to start with a solid wood frame. To finish out the build, I used most of the parts from a new Squier Affinity Telecaster, just swapping the bridge for a top loader style. I bought a construction grade 2x12 and cut it into 4 segments. I also bought and cut a 4x8 sheet of hardboard, sometimes known as Masonite. To start, I traced out a paper template and then squared up the edges of my 2x12. From the remaining wood cutoffs, I glued up a segment which will become one of the edges or wings of the guitar. I could have cut up another segment of the 2x12, but I wanted to do this in the spirit of the old Danelectro guitars, so gluing up cutoffs seemed appropriate. So here I am at the Scrollsaw. My buddy Kung Fu Luke gifted me this Scrollsaw for the channel, so I put it to good use here. A bandsaw works great for cutting out body shapes such as thick stock, but for this hollow frame build, the Scrollsaw was perfect. I was able to remove the blade and cut shapes directly out of the interior sections. One important detail, however, is you'll need high quality blades with a low tooth count. Mine was a 10-tooth, skip-tooth design, and it worked really well. You could go down as low as 5 or 6 or 7, and that would be great for thick stock such as this. I also drilled holes at every turning point, which really helped the accuracy of the cuts. Another point worth mentioning is that Douglas fir is quite heavy. A lighter wood such as poplar or pine might have made an overall lighter instrument. This 2x12 was quite wet when I bought it. I allowed it to dry for about 8 months before beginning the process. If you have access to properly seasoned wood, consider using that before using construction grade wet lumber. Okay, round 1 of sanding. With most of my builds, I try to find a modest balance between hand tools and bigger, more expensive tools. As such, I ended up using a combination of a handheld power sander, a trim router, and sandpaper wrapped around various dowels. If you have more expensive tools, such as a disc sander, planer, joiner, a spindle sander, your experience will be a little bit different. Those tools are more efficient and you can make a finished body in much less time with a bit less sanding. To flatten the top and the back of the frame, I used sandpaper on a flat surface and just kept sanding and flipping until it was very close. Now I'm just tracing out the rough shape onto the hardboard for the top and back. And rough cutting it on the scroll saw. Here I'm just taking off a little thickness from the back of the frame, about 1/8 of an inch, and relieving the little rod so it doesn't touch the top or back. Now I'm drilling the main holes into the frame before I attach the top and the back. One thing I would do differently is drill the hole for the ground wire after the glue up. Okay, gluing up the top and back now. Use plenty of glue, this hardboard really soaks it up. Also, I ended up using a lot more weight on top of the body, somewhere around 100 pounds. Okay, it's the next day. Back to the scroll saw. A jigsaw might be easier for this part, or perhaps a trim router with a flush cut bit. I decided to work outside, so my table is not as sturdy as my bench. In hindsight, when making another of these builds, I'll either build or buy an MDF template. They're so inexpensive now, there's really no excuse for not using one. Had I used a template and router, it probably would have saved me a good deal of work. Be warned though, hardboard is very hard on tools. I wouldn't subject my favorite router bits to it any more than necessary. I like the hand building method, but the template takes a lot of the guesswork and problem solving out of the process. So that brings us to round 2 of shaping and sanding. This is 60 grit sandpaper, which is a real improvement for sanding the overall shape. And I made a template from the Squier body, which was just a hair smaller in the lower bout than my body. It worked out fine to place all the elements, including the neck and the pickguard. Now I'll cut the cavities into the body. Without a router, drilling and sanding are about the best ways to cut holes into Masonite. Here I used a Dremel with an 80 grit sanding bit just to clean up all the edges. I ended up making a neck template to find the center line of the guitar and drill out some of the hardboard and extra mass from the neck pocket. I used the 3-board method to cut the final neck pocket, though I only really used 2 boards on the first pass. The second pass I used 3 very straight plywood cutoffs, and for the last pass I used the inside of the neck pocket itself. Since I didn't use a template on the final pass, and my router plate was a little too small, I ended up cutting about 1.5 millimeters too deep, or about 1/16 of an inch. Here's the final round of shaping. And I decided to use the hand sander to make the 1/8 inch roundover on the body. I've done this before and it works surprisingly well. I thought it might be a nice idea to try and attach a vinyl sticker to paint over the headstock. In the future, I'd probably start with a color similar to the final product. Okay, time for the finish work. I'll start by saying I like the color of this paint. However, using this particular spray paint was a huge pain and a major compromise. This is the low-pressure graffiti spray from a company who shall remain nameless. I wouldn't under any circumstances use this product again, unless I absolutely did not care about the results. The nozzle spits and spatters from pretty much the first pressing. Each pass is worse than the last. Also, though it claims to spray from any angle in 360 degrees, it quickly becomes clear that that's not the case. Finally, the paint is basically dry by the time it hits the surface, so the buildup of paint has a sandy, chalky texture that is completely useless unless that's your desired result. By the end, you can see I've just resolved to emptying the can onto the surface of the guitar, hoping for some coverage that would stick. Lucky for me, rustic, relic paint schemes are popular these days because no amount of sanding or buffing will fix this mess. Now, I accept some small amount of blame since I did in fact buy a graffiti spray, and should have expected poor results having watched the company's how-to videos. Also, I guess I should have connected the dots between low pressure and very low coverage, because as you can see, the spray pattern is just an inch or two wide at most. Here's the aftermath of that disaster of a paint session. I'm literally just wiping away the chalky buildup of spray, even after about a week of drying. Instead of repainting the guitar, I decided to sand and buff the paint and simply live with the result. The only thing that seemed to cure this paint was an application of this plastic polish, which I used to buff the finish. I also gave it a coat of hard wax. However, I have a feeling this paint will mark anything it comes in contact with unless you have some type of clear coat, so you have been warned. I made some thin hardwood shims for my body, and I'm going to use them to line up the holes on my neck. By drilling the holes into the shims, I can now transfer the exact holes into the neck pocket. I'll start with a few pilot holes, then step up to a larger bit. I run the bits in reverse to center the bit into the holes, then drill as straight as possible. For the last few minutes, I'll play some music that I wrote and recorded with this guitar, so you can hear how it sounds. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. The music is about to get loud, so if you're wearing headphones, turn down the volume now. So there you have it, a Tele guitar in the style of a Danelectro. Have you made a similar instrument, or is there a guitar you'd like to see made in this style? Let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.